Fab. So, I mean, yeah, how has your lockdown been? Like, so we've been asking everyone, yeah, well, how's it been treating you? What have you been busy with?
Um, you know what? It's actually been all right. Like, I mean, only now I'm like, okay, I need to get out of lockdown. But before that, I was loving life. I've just been doing a lot of yoga,
Mm.
and painting and
Oh,
stuff.
okay. You quite the
So yeah,
artist.
sorry.
You quite the artist.
Well, so before wrestling, I used to love drawing at school, and painting and stuff. But once I started wrestling, like I just didn't have time for it. So this has been like a time that I could get back into it.
Mm.
And when I was at college, I used to always I studied art at college before I went to university, and I always drew Kelly in my book. And my teacher hated it because it was just like, why are you always drawing this girl in a bra? Like, like why has she never got clothes on? I'm like, it's just Kelly. It's what she wears in the ring. So I always used to draw wrestling and Kelly and that lot. So and now I finally got some time to paint again and stuff. So
I mean, I actually had that slated down to ask you later on, but as you bring it up, we've got to talk about, there's a few things that I guess people know you well for outside of wrestling, and one of them is just your love of diva generally. Um, both in pop music and in, noughties wrestlers.
yes.
So where does that love of the diva come from?
Yeah, just I think it came from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I watched that before WWE. When that finished, the next closest thing to the stereotypical dumb blonde girl kicking everyone's ass was, I think, WWE with all the blonde divas. But also, I think I've always just been such a feminist. I've always related to the women more than the men, to be honest, because I'm more of their height and their weight. And um, my mum had 7 sisters, so in my family, there's always been a sense of like girl power and all of that. So that from Buffy the Vampire Slayer to the Divas, and just any time I watch a program, I feel like my favorite character is always the stereotypical, dumb blonde. And like Legally Blonde is my favorite film of all time. So all of that just led me to the Divas. And they were always so playful. Like, I liked the Divas wrestling because it was playful, it was fun, they were all bubbly, and it wasn't like this serious, hard hitting, depressing match. They always had fun in their matches. So I mean, I know what people say, like, oh my god, boo the gimmick matches, but I enjoyed them. I'm not gonna lie, like they were some of my favorite matches.
I was going to say, because that's the thing, is you totally mentioned it there. There's a lot of, especially now with, obviously, especially, I guess, in WWE, the women's revolution that took place, and, women finally, well, I guess, treated more like their male counterparts there.
Yeah.
And I think there's almost like a taboo now about talking about that Divas era, like because of what it was and how people thought the women weren't taken seriously, and obviously to an extent they weren't. But it's interesting to hear you say it from that point of view, where obviously as someone who quite enjoyed that era. So how do you see that evolution of women's wrestling? And I guess do you prefer, not necessarily do you prefer the Divas era now to like women's wrestling now, but what I mean, what have you made of that evolution of how women's wrestling has gone?
Well, I mean, okay, so I love it. Like, I love how far they've come. Like, the fact that they actually get longer matches and time to have a good match. Because, I mean, not gonna lie, when it was a 2-minute match, that was a bit annoying. You couldn't really enjoy any of it. But, like, so the fact that they have time to show what they can do is great. I love that. Or, like, the women in the main event at WrestleMania a few years ago, like that was great and amazing. I love how far they've come, and the fact that they have more than like 6 girls. Because back in the day when there was like, if you played the games and there was like 6 girls in the game, that was like, oh, there's so much. Like, oh my god, there's more than 4. So like now that they've got like a whole like roster full of so much talent. Like that is so great. But like I do miss the old names, like a Tori Wilson and a Kelly Kelly and a Trish Stratus. Like when I watch the Royal Rumble when they all come back, I noticed that the Divas walking down to the ring is literally my favorite part of the Rumbles. Like I cheer more for them than the ones that are out there now. I don't know if it's because I was a kid when I watched them, but it was, I don't know. I love what they're doing now, but I wish that the talent that was there back then had the time that they have now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even the ones that couldn't wrestle like technically that good, they still put on entertaining matches. And I felt like at the time, as someone that had never stepped into the ring, as just a wrestling fan, I actually could relate to some of those matches, because if I were to get into a bar fight, which I won't, I never get into fights, but if I were to get into the fight, I probably would grab someone by the hair and throw them across the room. I probably would slap them across the face. So I related to them. But yeah, I love it. I'll always love what they do. But yeah, I think the thing that I love about the Divas was say, like, because it was so playful, and say if I had a bad day at school or whatever, I knew that I could put on WWE and there would be like a Halloween Divas Battle Royal, where everyone just comes out dressed as cats or something, and it'd be quite funny. And yeah, it just made me smile. They always made me smile. And well, it's so much better than it was. Like, but because so like 5 years ago or whatever, there was hardly any out wrestlers, and now suddenly I feel like we all started training at the same time, and like, you know, and there was only a handful before, and now there's a few more. There's only a handful now, but still, it's like when I go to a show, it's like, oh, I'm not the only gay one, so yay, and that's great, because before it was kind of like, oh yeah, I'm the only one there. But it's nice to see that people aren't being portrayed as like the token or gay character, or they're a joke or anything. Like that would have been the case years ago, but now it's not. And that's amazing to see. And like I even feel that with myself, is that like when I first started wrestling, I was aware of like that sort of stereotype. And people being like pigeonholed into that joke character. But once I started wrestling, especially the places I started wrestling at, in like Lucha Britannia and stuff, I've never been pigeonholed into that character myself. So experiencing that has been great. And now just like going over to the States and seeing like there was enough LGBTQ plus wrestlers to actually be put on a whole show. Because before it was like, okay, there was kind of like room for only one person on a show. Like kind of like how the women's matches were, there would only be one women's match. So if there was like one gay wrestler on the show, it was kind of like, oh, there can't be another one on the show because that spot is already taken. You know, people felt that way. I never actually followed that rule. If there was a gay person on that show, I was still going to get on it regardless, because I never put that limit on myself. But I was aware that that was kind of the way things ran back in the day, and now it's so much better. But I think when you compare the wrestling industry to, I don't know, maybe another industry, it seems like wrestling is kind of a bit behind. I mean, this is 2021, and it's still kind of rare to see an openly gay wrestler. Like, there's a few, but, you know, it's 2021, so, but we'll take progress, you know, where it's there, so we'll take that and we'll run with that. So.
I was going to say, as you mentioned that, why do you think that is? Because obviously, I'm a big football fan myself, and you see it a lot in football. You know, there's no current, you know, openly out footballers. In the men's game at least, I think there are a few in the women's game, but not in the men's game. And I feel like as someone who's generally a sports fan, it's a very much sport based thing. When you mention, you know, in terms of other areas where, you know, being from the LGBTQ background is more accepted, it seems like sport is still that one area that's yet to catch up.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is? As someone who is an athlete, who works in sport, or, you know, if WWE called it sports entertainment, who works in an athletic industry, you know, why do you think it's the athletics type that seem to have this problem?
I just think it's like it's been part of the culture for so long that it will take a while for it to change. Because I know, like, if you ask a certain person, they would be like, oh, it's because, you know, what can we do if there's not that many gay people training to be these athletes? So, you know, we won't have that many. But that I don't even think that's the problem. Because there are people at training schools, like, you know, so that excuse doesn't work anymore. And I think it's some of it is sort of like the people that run these promotions, you know, because they choose talent that they book. So if there is the talent out there and they don't use the talent, then you won't have the representation. So I don't know. I think it's a part of like the people that book the shows, or just the way that the industry is, because for so long it was, you know, it's a man's sport, like macho kind of masculine type guys thing. But as times are changing, obviously that's changing. But I think there's a lot of people that still want to hold on to that old mentality. I mean, I feel safe that like most of the shows I'm on to, you know, be who the hell I am, blah blah blah. I don't feel scared or anything. But there are definitely some promotions out there that I would never set foot in the door, because I know what they would be like, because they've got like an old school mentality. So I think it's just the people in the industry, really, that and then someone from the outside would see that, because it's not exactly hard to see that sometimes you don't fit into an industry. So I think it's that.
Sure, absolutely, and that's the thing. I was going to move on to something else, but actually, as you bring that up, obviously, this is something that we've asked a couple of people, but I'd totally be okay if you didn't want to answer this. But obviously, in the wake of speaking out and everything, and you mentioned how you know, perhaps wrestlers, you know, need to be braver to say no to people, to not work for people if they've got certain, you know, ideals, things like that. Do you think it's the same that, you know, both with wrestlers and I think with fans as well? Do you think that both need to be, you know, I guess braver in saying no to certain companies if there's certain, you know, backgrounds that aren't too savoury?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fans are great. The fans are the best thing about the industry, because without even the fans retweeting everyone's tweet, because some of these wrestlers wouldn't have backed each other up if it wasn't for some of the fans retweeting stuff. So the fans have always been the best part. They've always accepted me as well. But it's I think people in the industry need to be more vocal about saying no. For example, like, if I know someone is a trash person, I would most likely say no to even wrestling at their federation, because like, if I'm not going to feel welcomed there, or if I'm going to feel like, oh, I'm working for just a piece of trash, then I can't take that booking. I can't do that. I'd rather work for people that I know are good people. Whereas there are people, a lot of people in the wrestling industry, that will know what has gone on with a certain promoter, and they will sit next to you in the car ride to another show after you've told them what has happened. But then they'll go, oh, well, you know, it hasn't happened to me, so I'm just going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep working for them. That's what a lot of people really are like. Or they will, because everyone wants to be successful, they don't want to hinder their career. So I guess they could be like, oh, well, I was getting bookings at that place. I don't want to lose the bookings. That's what a lot of people are. A lot of people just brush under the carpet what goes on. And it's been like that for decades. Like, these people that have been mentioned this isn't new news. Like, to the fans, it's news. But in the industry, people have known about half of this stuff for years, and they just turn a blind eye to it. So I'm so glad that it's not like that anymore, and that the whole thing came out and everyone said their truth. Because, like, sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, like, I love wrestling and I'm always excited to be there, but there are some times where I feel like you could see people and they're grizzled, they don't want to be there, and then, like, if you walk in excited, it's suddenly like, what are you doing, you know? But now it makes sense that everyone's grizzled, because everyone has something that they've been done wrong by that person, and they've had to keep quiet about it, and they've had it brushed under the carpet. And when you hold these things in and you brush it under the carpet, it's so hard to have a good time. So I'm so glad people are being more open with things now. But yeah, definitely saying no. There's the power to saying no. Some people would just take any booking that comes their way. But if you genuinely know you shouldn't be doing that booking or working for that person, saying no really does feel powerful. Yeah, it's like hit your control back kind of thing.
Absolutely. No, for sure. Totally. And you mentioned a few of the good people there, which is why I was going to get on to the company that me and my mates frequent, the one that we've seen you at many times, which is Riptide Wrestling. And obviously, I mean, you had a great experience with Riptide. First Pride of Brighton champion. I mean, I wanted to ask you about that whole experience, because that was the weekend that was that your second appearance at Riptide?
No, I think my third. I'd done the Riptide Rumble.
Yes, you did. Sorry, yes.
Yeah, and then I had the opening match with Shakira in the tournament, which I lost.
Yeah.
And then so the weekend was like my third time there. Yeah.
So how did that all come back? Because obviously tell us if it was different, but I mean, obviously storyline wise, it was the fact that you'd come in for Candy Floss, who had been injured.
Yeah.
And you took on Shakira. Was that actually the case, or were you planning to be on the show anyway?
That literally was the case.
That was the case.
I mean, so I was supposed to be on the show anyway, but not in the tournament.
Right.
So we'd already had a match for promos and stuff for me versus Mike Bird. But and that still went on. But the actual coming back into the tournament, literally, that was the case.
And so what was that like? I mean, when did you find out that you were going to be like winning the whole thing?
Literally the night before.
Is that what they told you?
Well, no, so I didn't know. I don't think I knew I was winning the whole thing, but I knew I was going to be put back into the tournament the night before. So he called. Josh called me up and was like, "Yeah, we're thinking of putting you back in the tournament." But it was so weird, because when he told me that on the phone, I just had a feeling that I was going to win the whole thing. Like, he didn't say it, but I had this like gut feeling, and because I think he asked me, was like, "We're still having your match with Mike Bird, but would you like to also have another match? Would you be comfortable with that? Yes or no?" And I was like, well, I'm not going to say no. Like, I feel like I'm going to win the whole thing. So I said yeah, and then that just manifested itself, and then winning the whole thing. That was like, I knew that would be a good moment if that happened, and then it did happen, and it was better than I thought it was going to be. I
was going to ask about that, is because I think, especially from the Riptide fans that I spoke to and the ones that I knew, before you got put back in, I think the consensus was that we all thought that Kurt was going to win it because he'd been built in that way, and it looked like it was going to be sort of his to lose, as it were. And in the end, obviously, it was. But I mean, how did that feel going over in that match? Because I guess, yeah, like I say, that the consensus seemed to be that Kurt was going to win it, and obviously, it was only like your third appearance at Riptide, whereas Kurt had been in it from the beginning, and you got such a good reaction winning it. Like everyone was buzzing for you. I mean, was that a surprise? How did that feel, that moment?
Well, okay, so that was a surprise. So like, I know that like I've been babyface for so long in whatever place I wrestle that I know I hope that I'll get cheered. But with Riptide, it was when they even announced like the poster for who was going to be in the Pride of Brighton. I just really didn't think I was going to win because I felt like everyone else on there at the time had like kind of been on Riptide for a while and done other big shows, and they were kind of like more further along and established than I was. So then, first of all, making it to the finals, I was like, okay, wow, okay. And then winning it really was a surprise, and I felt like they cheered so like loud for me, and that was so good, and that really was what I needed to hear. Because sometimes on the bigger indie shows, I'm aware that my wrestling is different to what everyone else does. I am aware that I bring something different to the table, and it's different to what a lot of the hardcore indie fans are used to. Like, for example, because I watch Divas wrestling, I know I do the Divas moves, and you won't see me doing a really complicated sequence with a 630, 450 flip. Like, you won't see that from me. So when I was even in the main event of that show, I was like, oh, will these people like me? I hope they do. And then they did. So like that was great, and that was the validation that I needed from that. Yeah, so that was great. That showed me that no matter what show I'm on, like I know I can win people over. Yeah.
Yeah, and you certainly did that at Riptide. I mean, the final thing I was going to talk to you about with that show, with that day, was mainly endurance. Because I mean, you had 3 matches over the course of those 2 shows.
Yeah.
And it was a sweltering day. I mean, I know the final match was in the evening, but even then, it was so hot. Like, how do you go out and do that 3 times in one day in that heat?
Well, so I had loads of ice poles. That was the actual secret, with the ice poles. And I know it sounds so stupid, but just having the ice poles there kept me cool throughout the whole day. So I had the first match, and I think as I did my entrance, I thought, "Whoa, it's hot out here! Jesus! How am I going to have 3 matches?" But I had the first match, and then I had an ice pole or something, and I just kept in the shade when I wasn't wrestling. So like, I was inside, and that was alright. And but it was the crowd reaction that kept me going, and knowing that this day was going to be special to me in my career. That it wasn't just some, random normal day. It was like actually an important day, and I knew that if I put the work in, I would reap the rewards. So that's what I did, and just by the final match, which was at night time, I remember I was so tired, but this is the thing, like, so Mad Kurt had walked to the ring, and I was behind, like, the stage bit before walking out, and I looked up at the sky, and I thought, oh, wow, like, I am tired, but I would so rather be tired doing something I love rather than being tired at some dead-end job that I hate. And because I really could be doing something I hate right now, but instead I'm not. I'm doing something that I really love. And I realized, like, wow, I'm happy. and it felt like WrestleMania to me. That's what it felt like. Because the first match was in the morning when it was all sunny, and the last match was at night. I was there for the whole day, and yeah, it just felt like something really special. So that got me through it.
Fab. And obviously, Riptide, unfortunately, vacated their titles recently. I guess it's the natural thing. They don't know when they're going to be back, and it seems like a smart thing to do. But
yeah,
I mean, does that make you more determined to come back and win the title again, or to win the actual Riptide title?
Well, so I had a shot. Obviously, with having the Pride of Brighton for over a year, I was like, oh, I'm getting that title shot for the Brighton Championship. Now we don't know what is going to happen, but it means I just get to go back into the mix. And if I have to prove myself again to get a shot at that, then that's totally fine. I'm going to go do it. That's what I'm here for. I'm coming to snatch that championship. So that's what I got to do. And that's what I got to do.
And I'm sure we can't wait to see that when that eventually happens, because I'm sure it will. But I mean, finally, everyone seems to have such good things to say about Riptide. And obviously, as fans, we only see what they put out as a product. But what can you say about what goes on behind the scenes and how you're treated and how Josh runs it? And
wow, Riptide really is amazing. So in wrestling, like I've wrestled for like a few different shows over the last few years, many different ones, and some of them you don't really feel at home in. Like you do them, but they're like you feel at home in the ring, but some of them you don't feel at home in backstage. And there are a few places that I really feel at home. So Lucha Britannia was where I first started and trained and everything. So that was my home. And then when I went to Riptide, it was like the first time where I'd found another place where I felt really at home and where I was like really happy to be in that. Like I just fit in there really well, and I didn't have to worry about backstage politics or anything. Like it's run by genuinely good people, and that is what I like the most. And as you can see in wrestling, that is quite a very rare thing to have a show run by genuinely nice people. So I think everyone knows that and respects that, and they like that, so they like to hold on to that. But they treat everyone so nice and with respect there, and they even have like concussion posters up backstage and stuff, and to know that if you get hurt or whatever, like your priorities first, they make sure that they emphasize that, and that is nice to feel valued, because on some of these shows you really don't. Like you literally break an arm, tear a ligament, and they expect you to just brush it under the carpet. But Riptide was always a place where you feel valued as a wrestler, and that's why everyone loves it. They're so kind. They're so aware as well of like people from all different types of backgrounds and stuff, and they're just the best. Literally the best. And you know that if you wrestle for Riptide too, you know that it's gonna get caught on some really good cameras as well. So it's just they treat you the best, and then you get the payoff as well, and then it makes you want to put that much more effort into it.
Well, they'll be delighted to hear that when they see this. But I mean, moving on, the one thing I obviously mentioned in my initial email to you that I want to talk to you about was something that I couldn't quite believe when I saw, and that was your appearance on A League of Their Own. Because that was just possibly the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. Just the most out there thing that I didn't think I'd ever see. I mean, how did that all come about?
Well, okay, so this came about, so I was training at the London School of Lucha Libre, and I literally only had 3 matches at this point, and I remember I had finally ordered ring gear, because I'd just thrown something together at this point, thrown in pink shorts, and that was that, but I'd ordered tassels for my legs, and they came that week. And Greg, my trainer, he mentioned that day, he said, we're going to have some researchers coming down to the school to look at everyone. So if you have ring gear, bring it down that day and wear it when we train. So we did the whole session and training in our ring gear. And yeah, that was the day my tassels came. So I was just showing them to everyone and I kept shaking my legs and I was like, oh, I love these tassels, blah, blah. And we had to have like little matches at the end. And yeah, I literally only had 3 matches, didn't really know what I was doing, but the researchers liked my outfit and they liked my personality. So they invited a few of us down to do like a test shoot and it was so much fun. And no one in British wrestling like had even known who I was at the time because I'd never wrestled I'd wrestled at Lucha, but I'd never wrestled in Brit Res. So that went well, and then they brought me back the week after because they thought I did a good job. And then when it finally aired on TV months later, they called me up again and was like, "Can you come back?" I was like, "Yes, this is fun." So that was that, and it's so weird because for years I would get recognized in the street more for that appearance on the League of Their Own than anything I'd done in wrestling. Like, wrestling fans wouldn't come up to me in the street, but non-wrestling fans that had seen me wrestle on a League of Their Own would come up to me and know I was a wrestler.
Amazing. That is fantastic.
I felt like they liked me more than hardcore wrestling fans. It was so weird, but like, so every time that would happen, I would be like, "Oh my god, yeah, it's me!" And they would go, "Oh, I don't really watch wrestling, but I saw you on a League of Their Own, and that's how I know you're a wrestler." So,
and then you're like, "Well, you should come and watch me actually wrestle."
Yeah, I'd say that, and then sometimes they would, and they would be like, "Oh my god, we listened to you, we actually came." So. Yeah.
Oh, fab, brilliant. Well, it's been great talking to you. I mean, for talking to me. I really appreciate it. It's been great. It's been so much fun.
Oh, thanks for having me. Anytime.